Almost 14 years ago, on October 14th, 2003, I sat alone in my apartment. I was eating pizza in the dark. The only light emanated from the TV as I watched my Chicago Cubs play the Florida Marlins in Game 6 of the National League Championship Series. Physically, I couldn't watch the game at a party or with anybody who might have the audacity to root against the Cubs. Momentum in sports is a very precarious thing. The Cubs were on the verge of making it to the World Series, and I needed to be around only positive energy. And in the fear of even the slightest of negativity, I chose to sit alone in the dark. Growing up as a Cubs fan was a disease. It encouraged insanity. As the well-known saying goes, insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. The Cubs had played every year since 1908 and not won the World Series. And I believed sincerely that 2003 was our year to end that terrible drought. The Cubs were winning Game 6. I watched every pitch in silence, occasionally calling my parents, who were watching the same game in Chicago, most likely in silence as well. Occasionally the phone would ring and it would be my dad. All of us just wanted the outs needed for the game to be over. Then, in the 8th inning, the Cubs were winning 3-0 when it happened. Luis Castillo for the Marlins was up to bat, and he hit what seemed to be an innocent pop-up that drifted foul. And the Cubs left fielder Moises Alou drifted into foul territory to grab it. The fans got so excited as the ball approached. Moises Alou leapt up to catch the precious 23rd out. But a Cubs fan reached over and snagged the ball before Moises Alou could touch it. The Cubs fan catching the foul ball prevented the Cubs from making the out. That fan accidentally hurt the team and Cubs fandom everywhere. And that fan's name was Steve Bartman. Moises Alou reacted in the moment by showing his disgust for that fan. And then to compound the problem, the Cubs immediately allowed 8 runs to score following that missed opportunity. That inning caused them to lose the lead, lose the game, and then the very next night, lose the series and end another season in disappointment. In 2011, ESPN made a documentary called Catching Hell about Steve Bartman's infamous catch. The film revealed that as the game progressed and the fans in Wrigley became unruly, Bartman quickly became a scapegoat. Security deemed it necessary to remove him for his own safety because they could not protect him in his seat. And the visual of watching security force him to stand up and walk out reinforced the idea of Steve Bartman at fault in the mindset of all of the Wrigley fans and all fans watching on TV. Police thought it was unsafe for Bartman to leave the stadium immediately, so they kept him inside until the end of the game, and then security snuck him outside in different clothes. He was harassed by Cubs fans for years until he was suspected to be forced to move away from Chicago. Bartman came to symbolize the curse. He was the human embodiment of the supernatural cause, the supernatural curse that had befallen the Cubs and all of its fans. If you look him up online, you will be overwhelmed by the volumes of articles and internet pages dedicated to his mistake, and then ultimately to ours. Then last fall, the Chicago Cubs began another run in the playoffs. The team actually made it to the World Series and fought their way to a 7th game, a single decisive game. A close friend of mine, and now a member of this synagogue, Jason Schutzer, called me up and asked me if I wanted to come with him to Game 7 of the World Series. We flew to Cleveland on a red-eye and watched the Cubs get out to a big lead before losing the lead in the 8th inning once again. And I slumped down in my seat, crushed. The 8th inning. The way you know I'm a rabbi is that in the moment of depression, I thought to myself, this is a moment of tshuva. From the Hebrew word lashuv, to return to the same crossroads in life again and again. This was a return to negativity, to our demise. What could we expect? It's the way it always has been. And I thought, this is why the Cubs are the most Jewish franchise in all of sports. And then it began to rain. And there was a rain delay. The game stopped. In this moment of incredible return, reflection, depression, familiarity, life just stopped. Perhaps the rain was serendipity. Perhaps it was divine. My wife Blair thought it was Cubs fans from the beyond crying. From my perspective, somebody or something decided to press the pause button on life. At the game, we all retreated for cover under the pavilion behind our seats, and a group of religious Jews who noticed my kippah under my baseball hat asked me if I could help make a minyan for Mariv. I thought to myself, if there was ever a time for prayer, this was it. And we gathered together and prayed Mariv together so that somebody I didn't know could say Kaddish for their loved one who I would never meet. And then the rain stopped, and the teams took the field again. The rain delay, the pause, lasted just over 17 minutes. Let's call it 18. The rabbis teach us that the creation of the world paused for 18 minutes before the first Shabbat. I'll let you decide now if it was serendipity or divine. And the Cubs came out determined and won the game. And I cried. And everybody cried. We cried because we won. The Cleveland Indians fans cried because they lost. The skies opened, and it began to drizzle again, as if to wipe the slate clean. In that powerful rain, the drought ended. The Cubs officially ended the championship drought of 108 years. And I thought to myself, redemption. This is why the Cubs are the most Jewish franchise in all of sports. Many in this congregation wrote me notes of congratulations as if I had played in that game. And if you think about it, the Cubs have been part of my life far longer than they've been part of the lives of Chris Bryant or Anthony Rizzo. Canterdale Schatz bought me Cubs socks. Stu Bernstein cut out the Cubs photo on the front of the LA Times sports section and framed it for me. And it still hangs on the wall of my office. Finally, all was right in Cubs fandom. We were champions. Next year is right now. We had entered the promised land. It took us a long time, but we finally reached the promised land. And that is why I thought that the Cubs were the most Jewish franchise in all of sports. And then recently, on July 31st, 2017, I read an article on ESPN.com titled, "Cubs Give World Series Ring to Steve Bartman." In the article, Cubs owner Tom Ricketts says, and I quote, "On behalf of the entire Chicago Cubs organization, we are honored to present a 2016 World Series championship ring to Mr. Steve Bartman. We hope this provides closure on an unfortunate chapter of the story that has perpetuated throughout our quest to win a long-awaited World Series." End of quote. He concludes by saying, and I quote, "While no single gesture can fully lift the public burden he has endured for more than a decade, we felt it was important Steve knows he has been and continues to be fully embraced by this organization." End of quote. Bartman responded with a very lengthy statement. I'll read the following excerpts. I quote, "Although I do not consider myself worthy of such an honor, I am deeply moved and sincerely grateful to receive an official Chicago Cubs 2016 World Series championship ring. Most meaningful is the genuine outreach from the Ricketts family on behalf of the Cubs organization and fans, signifying to me that I am welcomed back into the Cubs family and have their support going forward." End of quote. Later in the statement, Bartman continued with these words, and I quote, "My hope is that we all can learn from my experience to view sports as entertainment and prevent harsh scapegoating. Moreover, I hope this ring gesture will be the start of an important healing and reconciliation process for all involved." End of quote. We, all of us, from the owner of the Cubs through an ordinary Cubs fan and fans of other teams, sports fans and people who don't like sports, Jews and non-Jews, we have the ability to understand that while many moments in life often seem bigger than ourselves, we are responsible for the way in which we behave. We always have a choice. The way we behave when we win and when we don't. We always have a choice to act like a mensch and shake hands or to not. We always have a choice to put our arm around another human being and make them feel welcome or to shun them. We all know the correct behavior in each of these choices. And we shouldn't kid ourselves. The better behavior is always the more difficult one in the moment. And the reason why we often fail in the moment is because we're human, and our instinct is not to welcome the other and not to shake hands in defeat. And that is precisely the reason why we have to do tshuva, to return to those moments in our lives and to reflect on them during this time, to train ourselves to act better, to be better. I've learned that most often, our tshuva, revisiting the crossroads, doesn't lead us to the 8th inning. It leads us to how we behave after the game is over. Ultimately, life is not a game about winning or losing. Our lives will be judged on how we treat those around us. There simply aren't enough positive stories today about people acting kind and good and decent to one another. So let's initiate those stories ourselves as a community. Let's take upon ourselves the responsibility to be the light unto the nations, to set an example. The Cubs never had Sandy Koufax or Hank Greenberg. We have Theo Epstein. And more important than the Cubs' victory is the fact that the Cubs did Teshuva. And that is why we are the most Jewish franchise in all of sports. Unless the Dodgers win the World Series this year, in which case I'll be standing here next year talking about Sandy Koufax. Let us all be sealed for a good year and for a year of being good and acting good. Shana Tova.
That's why we're the most Jewish franchise.